Wrong one, slow one, take one, Leonard Cheshire.
What I want to do is to try and answer the question, what is a home? Because I find that when I've been speaking to people, they'll say to me, yes, I understand what you've said about your philosophy. I understand that what you're trying to do is give disabled people a normal life, but I can't really picture a home. So I would like to try, as it were, to take you into a home, show you something of its life and just what goes on. My difficulty is that we have quite a large number of homes, and they're all different. In fact, we cannot say that there's such a thing as a typical home. Our policy has always been to allow local groups who want to start a home the maximum possible freedom, almost autonomy, to do it in their own way, to decide what they think is the greatest need, and to meet that need in their own way according to their own local circumstances. And obviously those local circumstances, in addition to their particular customs and traditions and culture and so on, will govern to a large extent the form that the home takes. So that we cannot say either that there's a typical home or that in our own minds there's such a thing as an ideal home. Because we are dealing with people, human beings. And what may be, objectively speaking, an ideal home may not suit a group of particular human beings. So one has to remember that. And what I think I will do is to take one specific home and one particular disabled resident, and in talking about them, use that as a basis to try and give a broader and more comprehensive account of a home. Now, I think I have to start just by one or two things in general. First, what are the homes for? Who are they for? And what are they trying to achieve? Well, they've been brought into being solely in order to fill a gap. We only exist if there is a gap to be filled that nobody else is filling properly. And the particular gap that we, as it were, stumbled across was the need for the right kind of accommodation for physically disabled people who are disabled beyond the point where they can live their own independent lives in the community. That's to say, either on their own or with their families. They need some kind of, if I can use this word, sheltered environment, and they need a degree of care in the form of human help by staff and of aids and gadgets which would not be available to them as things stand today out in the world. Now, these residents, as we call them, vary in age very considerably. The youngest may be 16, 17, and the oldest may be right up to the 70s or 80s. But by and large, we concentrate on the younger, because we found that particularly amongst the younger age group, is there a real need for the right kind of environment. An environment that will enable them each to grow and develop in the way that he or she wants, within the limits of their disability. I think we want, first of all, to give them the feeling of security. This is my home. My home, I have a right to be here, and within reason, I can do what I like in it. If I go away and try to experiment with living on my own, and I find it doesn't work, I can come back. Because I feel that basically every human being in the world needs a security of a home that is his own. So this is the first thing that the homes are trying to provide. But secondly, they're trying to give each person the maximum possible choice of the type of life he wants to lead, to express himself in his own way, to help him to be a creative, useful member of the community. In other words, to help him do some work or follow a hobby, whatever he wants. In many cases, they decide to get married. If they do, well, we will provide the married accommodation and the care that they need. As to the homes themselves, the actual buildings and the facilities and so on that they have, these obviously vary very greatly. Ideally speaking, one would like a purpose-built home. That's to say, a home that's been specially designed and specially built from scratch for the disabled people who are going to live in it. But the problem is that to do that, you've got to have all your money at the beginning, and most groups, in most communities, can't afford it. So a great many have had to start with existing buildings, some of which are not really suitable, but they've been able to adapt them, then eventually extend them, perhaps to the point where in the end all the residents are living in new extensions and the original building is used for staff quarters, a recreation room, workshop, so on. One advantage, though, that an old home has, if it's the right home, is that it does have an atmosphere of its own that's come from the people who've lived in it. And that atmosphere will be a real contribution, I find, to the life of those who live in it. Now, finally, before I come to the one home, I'd like to mention one phenomenon that I've noticed and always strikes me. And that is that although every home is there to give the individual residents a life of their own, in fact, as it develops, it begins to acquire a personality all of its own. In fact, if I can put it this way, standing a little back from it, as I do, I'm not intimately involved in the administration, I see each of the different homes rather as different individuals. They do have an individual personality and character of their own, but of course the same nature. They're all the same, basically the same in nature. And I think the reason is the amount of effort that's gone into building that home and getting it going. Because after all, when you consider that every home has had to start absolutely from scratch, in a new district, probably unknown, with no resources, and so a whole mass of people, young, old, from different backgrounds, have joined together to collect money, to work, to design, to plan, to organize a home. And each of them, in their little way, or their big way, have left a little bit of themselves in that home. And so have the residents. So that you find that the residents, while completely leading their own lives as they want, are also part and parcel of something bigger than themselves, to which they themselves contribute, and from which, obviously, they draw strength and support. And it's very interesting, I find. You get one resident from one home, goes to another for a holiday. And he comes back and he says, that was a beautiful home. It was a marvelous home. But how glad I am to be back here. Now, the residents in the other home cannot understand this, because to them, their home is the best. And it may well be that that other home is a better home. But to the resident himself, his own home is my home. And my home is where I want to be. And I don't think I've ever heard somebody go to another home and come back and say, I wish I was there. Well, now to come to the one home that I'd like to describe, Timsbury, the home near Bath. Okay.
Right.
Slate two, take two.
Well, now to come to my one home, the home called Timsbury, near Bath in the West Country in Somerset. It started in 1962 in an existing building, which I thought was really most unlikely building for a home, in rather hilly country and rather remote. And I know that when I went down there the first time to see them, I thought, well, I don't really know how this will work out. They started with 5 residents, and by 1977, they got to 31 residents with 2 holiday beds. They had given 14 single rooms, and they had a workshop and a physiotherapy room and a nice communal room and a television room. So it had then become a very nice building. The residents of the 31 they have, 60% need help with getting up, 80% need help with bathing in one way or another, and 30% are incontinent. 6 of them altogether are ambulant, able to walk. All the others are in wheelchairs, though in fact the home makes a great effort to get those who can out of their wheelchairs for part of the day. And there's a great emphasis in physiotherapy on that, on getting them out of their wheelchairs. Just to give you some idea of their daily routine, because I don't think that most people appreciate just how much effort for a severely disabled person goes into the sheer basic functions of daily life, of getting up, being bathed, going to the toilet, having your meals, and so on. And for many of them, this really takes up all their effort. So the rest of the time, they just want to sit back and relax. As to their routine, it starts for some of them at 6 in the morning. Now, that sounds very early, but in fact it's by their choice. And this is 2 or 3 of the ambulant ones who can get up themselves. They get up at 6. For the rest, getting up starts at 7:30 and will go on till about 9:30. Breakfast starts at 8:15 and goes on till about 9, which means that those who can't get down in time are given breakfast on a tray in bed. Very nice. Then bathing. Well, bathing is a long operation when most have got to be taken in a hoist or lifted into the bath. So obviously that cannot be done first thing in the morning and last thing at night, but stretches throughout the day, and people have to take their turns. Then meal times, they have a very nice dining room, and they sit at tables of 4, which they try to get 2 wheelchairs and 2 who are not in a wheelchair. And quite a number of them will help each other if they can't manage to feed themselves. Physiotherapy is a crucial part of the day, and there are 2 part-time physiotherapists who come to the home and give physiotherapy to those who are going to benefit from it. But it is most important, if one is a disabled person, to do everything possible to keep mobility and keep as active as possible. The doctor doesn't have to come very often, because most people have got to the point where, unless they catch a cold or get pneumonia or something, there's nothing much more the doctor can do. So he comes round once a week on a sort of weekly routine visit, and always on call when needed. Well, then the final part of the routine, the most disputed of all, is going to bed. And this is an issue throughout all the homes all over the country. And I don't think it'll ever get totally resolved. You can see the problem, that each individual wants to go to bed at the time of his own choosing, and that's going to vary from day to day according to circumstances. Has he gone out late? Is there something on telly he wants to watch? And so on. But as 60% need help with getting to bed, there have got to be the staff there. And not many are going to want to go to bed before 8. So that means that the night staff have got to do it all. Well, if you have a small home, you can't afford to carry more than 1 night nurse. It's economically impossible. And the bigger homes, like Timsbury, will have 2, or if they possibly can, 3 every night, in order to allow everybody to go to bed just when he wants. And this is the policy of the home, in fact, of every home. Now, something about their leisure and recreation. The Timsbury home is remarkable for the degree of involvement that it's got with the outside community. You get an enormous number of outside visitors and outside voluntary helpers. And many of them are very young. They're children. They're between 8 and 10, a great many of them. And it really is most inspiring sight to come into the home and look, you see them. What is absolutely remarkable about them, and the most meaningful thing of all, I think, is that the children never notice the handicap. They're just interested in the person. And they'll come and write letters or read or bring their comics and show their comics, or just be there and just let it be part of their own day spent with the residents. Others, like the local ATC squadron, that's the Air Training Corps, have adopted the home, and they come into work to do projects and so on. Then, as I'm sure you can imagine, if you're living in a home of this sort, one thing you want to do, or most people want to do, is to go out. Though there are some who find it too much of an effort and they don't. But the majority do. And when they go out, they don't normally want to go out on a group expedition. They don't, as it were, want to be herded round wherever you or I might want to take them. So what they like is a private visit. And so local visitors will come along, take somebody out in their car to go shopping or to go and watch a football match. Some go swimming to a local swimming bath. Of course, Timsbury is not lucky like some of the homes that have their own swimming pool in the home itself. And that is used not only for the residents in the home, but for other disabled people who live in the district. And they keep coming in, like the Spastic Society, the Multiple Sclerosis Society, the Red Cross, and so on. They all come in, and that's a very active part of the home, the swimming pool. Timsbury is unique in 2 respects. It has its own chess club, which is very popular, and other people come in regularly and are there members of the chess club, and they play chess. They also have their own WI, as we call it, the Women's Institute, and that meets at the home and has outside members who come and take part in the meetings. The residents go out of their way to be helpful in the home. That's to say, they lay the tables for all the meals, and whenever there's a meeting, they prepare the room for the meeting. By and large, I think I can say that doing household chores is not very popular in the homes. The homes tend to think they're staffed to do this and it's not their own job. So Timsbury perhaps is an exception. It also has its workshop, where, amongst other things, it does pottery. Pottery is very peaceful, and I think it's very popular. But its workshop is not as big or as varied as some of the workshops throughout the homes. And if you go to some of the bigger workshops, I find it really inspiring to walk around and just watch what they're doing, what somebody with such disablement is able to make. Timsbury is different in another way. It has its own garden area and greenhouse. And one finds that disabled people, a lot of them, love gardening, provided you have a raised garden area that they can work in. Then also it has a day centre, which means that other disabled people from round about come and share their life. And in their future plans, which are now in the course of active preparation, not only are they extending to give every single person a single room, but they're going to build a separate large day centre which can really help the neighbourhood. And therefore you can see this two-way coming and going between the outside and the inside of the home. which means that the home is integrated into the community, and those who live in it themselves feel that they are integrated. Another activity of the residents, which really affects the most fundamental issue, is that of involvement in decision-making in the home. We have at Timsbury, one resident sits on the assessment committee, which is in effect the admissions committee for new residents, and another sits on the committee that appoints the staff. And when you think that most homes have a ratio of at least 2 staff to 3 residents, and sometimes 1 to 1, because of the degree of disablement, you realize that appointment of staff is a crucial thing to those who live in the home, having the right staff. Everything hinges upon having the right staff. The whole question of involvement by residents in decision-making is one of, I think, the most important and fundamental of all. It's absolutely essential that those who live in the home, the residents, are really consulted and really have a say in all the decisions that affect their lives. This is agreed, I think, completely in principle, but of course it's left to each home to decide how it's going to put it into practice. But what we are basically aiming at is one family. Not we the staff, you the residents, we the management, you the staff, and so on, but one united, integrated, if I may use the word, family. And now to take just one resident, my one chosen resident, Norman Whiteley, who's at our London home, or rather the first London home that we built. At the age of 14 and a half, when he was at school, he was going to school prayers, and he slipped on a little bit of ice that he didn't see and fell over backwards. Nobody thought very much of it, although in fact he had cracked 2 bones at the top of his spine, base of his neck. And he walked about like that for nearly a year till they discovered what the trouble was. He was rushed to hospital and operated on, and something went wrong with the operation, in consequence of which something happened to the bone and pressed on the nerve of his spine, so that he's, as you see him now, really very paralyzed indeed. Well, Norman had spent a long time in hospital at the moment that this home was opened and he heard about it. And it was decided that it would be better for him to come out of a hospital institutional environment to this particular home. But curiously, Norman was very apprehensive. And this is another rather remarkable thing you'll discover, that somebody who's been in hospital for a long time may well fear the step out into the outside world. He's been so used to being protected, he suddenly thinks, it's unknown, what am I going to? And this is how Norman arrived at the Dulwich home. Well, gradually he had to find his feet, and this, of course, he did, because he is a man with extraordinary initiative and highly intelligent. And one of the things that he contributed to was a minor revolution in the OT section, in the occupational therapy section. They'd been making baskets and wickerwork and the usual things you see everywhere. And suddenly one day, I suspect largely prompted by Norman, they said, we've had enough of this. This reminds us of hospitals. So they threw it all out of the window, literally out of the window. So then they had to start again with different activities. And together with various others, Norman started a printing press. It all sort of seemed to just fall out of the sky and suddenly just happen. They started by proofreading, discovered there was a need for printing in the area, got an order from the local Rotary Club, completed the order, and they've been working there ever since, doing their printing. Then the next thing that Norman did, when the Act, the Disabled Persons Act, was passed in Britain, emphasizing the need for integrating the disabled into normal living, Norman got elected onto the local council, and he's a full voting member, and he goes there 2 or 3 times a month, being particularly interested in the Committee on Old People and Disability and Health. But finally, and what to him is the most important of all his jobs, is his wheelchair fund. Entirely by his own efforts, he has created and built up a wheelchair fund to raise money, to buy wheelchairs and send them overseas to the developing countries, where usually they have no wheelchairs of any adequate quality at all. And he discovered this need when he attended the first international conference we ever had in 1969, and when listening to the various speeches, and I suspect meeting the delegates in between, he discovered this need, and gradually he's built it up. He raises his money in many different ways, by selling badges that are very popular at schools, by selling emblems, by going out and giving talks in different places. But there's one particular way that he raises money, and that is by organizing a carol service at Waterloo Station in London just before Christmas. And he's got a local school that come along with a band and they play. Norman is there in his wheelchair, and he usually brings 1 or 2 others to help him, and all sorts of children go around with their collecting boxes, waving them in front of people, and it is always a great success. To me, it's symbolic, because it shows that every one of us as a human being wants to feel that we can be useful and can contribute something. And I find that when a home gets onto its feet, when it's got over its great struggle to get onto its feet, it's there, then it begins to think, what can I do for other people? So today the homes are beginning to reach out to see what they can do for other people in need, either in their immediate vicinity or further afield. And Norman is a symbol of this, that he now spends his life building up something that he hopes and feels is going to do some good in its little way to the poorer countries. And I feel in my heart that that little wheelchair fund that started so modestly will build up into something really worthwhile.